Welcome to Music Student 101. Join us as we continue our discussion on the blues. In this episode, we will focus on Piedmont and Texas blues. We will also discuss some of the artists that contributed to their sounds. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
I am Jeremy Burns.
I am Matthew Scott Phillips.
And what you just heard was Postman Blues by our friend Jerry Chapman.
Nice work.
You've heard Jerry play the guitar on our show many times.
Indeed.
And it is great to have him back.
Yes, welcome back.
And that was an original of his. And I asked for something that kind of embodied the Piedmont style, and I think he came pretty close to it.
I think he came through really well, yeah. We'll talk about what that means.
So, it is time for another episode based on the blues.
Here we are. More blues. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been too long. Maybe about 4 or 5 years, actually.
Yeah, that's a while.
To our listeners, it might, just flip around, and there you are.
Yeah, to us, it's been about 5 years.
Now, here in the United States, we refer to February as Black History Month.
Indeed.
And this is mainly based on the birth dates of President Abraham Lincoln, who was born in February 12th.
Right.
Who
signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yep, back in 1863.
Oh, hey, look at that.
And Frederick Douglass, born February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Who was a freed slave turned abolitionist and author. So you can't talk about the blues without sharing a little African-American history. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Now, in Blues Part 1, which is episode 64, that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
We discussed the roots of the blues going way back to 1619 when the first slave ship arrived, and then on to Bessie Smith's 1923 release, which made her, that kind of covered what we consider the roots of the blues.
The sort of the blues roots, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, by the way, I noticed going back and listening to this episode, as I always do, I said Bessie Smith was born in 1989. Well, clearly we should...
Not quite, yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I know she wasn't. If I can go back and fix that in an effective enough way, I will. But if not, I will just go ahead and apologize for it now. That's
okay. Yeah,
silly stuff. But anyways, Blues Part 2, which was episode 89, we discussed the country blues, which dated back to the early 1900s, and the Mississippi or Delta blues.
Right.
And that's where we met some of the greats like W.C. Handy and Muddy Waters.
And what a lot of people think of as sort of the core roots of blues was along going up the Mississippi River, right? So the Delta blues, and then that you go up the river, and then there's Chicago blues, and
exactly.
Yeah.
Head out west, and you got Texas,
right?
Which we'll be talking about a little bit today. And Chicago will be in an up and coming episode for sure. And Muddy Waters actually ended up moving into Chicago and kind of being a part of that scene.
Yeah.
Muddy Waters from the Muddy Delta area. So anyways.
I believe his daughter was named Crystal.
That sounds right.
Crystal Waters?
Yeah, I think we talked about that in that episode, which is a great name.
Yeah.
But, at this point, for the most part, these genres aren't within a timeline. It's more regionally based.
Yeah, and... the history on them is sort of not well documented. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this is sort of musicology at its finest, when you kind of have to go in and compile fragmented records with anecdote, with legend, with to sort of compile up your best approximation of kind of what happened.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up ethnomusicology, because we talked about guys in Blues Part 1 like John Hammond, who kind of went out and recorded some of these rural artists. And then the Lomax family.
Right, yeah.
I call them song catchers.
Yeah.
But we're going to do an episode on that.
That would be great, yeah.
Wouldn't it be?
Yeah, some of those, really, the ethnomusicologists, before they had such a long, fancy name for it, just people going out and trying to record for posterity the music that was happening in particular places.
What an exciting time that must have been when recording first came out, and you can actually go out and...
Yeah.
It was on wax and aluminum discs, of course.
Yeah. And you had to line people up in front of a phonograph. You couldn't just come, with your Zoom recorder and record what they were doing, where they were doing it, right? You had to bring them to the,
Oh, yeah. Fidelity obviously was nothing what it is today.
Not great, yeah.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the Piedmont blues and the Texas region, the blues based on that region as well, Texas and Piedmont blues.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Before we do, we have a little social section.
As always.
I do have a little bit of the blues about the new review here.
Oh, no.
And it's not the fact that it's 3 stars or that's a negative review. It's the subject matter of the complaint I feel kind of bad about.
Okay.
So let's hear what they have to say, Matt.
So this person says, do not make fun of other cultures, please.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the content, but could y'all please not make fun of people's names from other cultures? It's not respectful and uncomfortable to hear. Specifically in Perfect Pitch episode, if you're wondering.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, certainly never intended to make fun of anyone as the pronunciation of anyone's name.
Would never intend to do that.
Would never intend to do that. Our pronunciation is far from perfect, admittedly.
No, but I had to go back and listen to the whole episode to see what they're talking about. I mean, I didn't want to. I was going to take it out,
Yeah.
But it's already been brought up, so I can't take it out.
Now we can't take it out.
All we can do is apologize for it. Sometimes my sense of humor overrides my sensitivity.
I see.
And we were talking about how in the Mandarin language, the word ma means 2 different things depending on what pitch you
recall
speak
that.
it at. And so we mentioned yo-yo ma and what kind of mused about what ma
might mean and
probably a family or regional name. But either way, I just want to apologize. If that did offend anybody, it was not our intention to do that.
We certainly don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable.
So, having said that, let us know if we ever say anything else like that offends. We try and keep it as sensitive and as welcoming to all cultures and genders as we can for this show. Now we have a new Patreon patron to speak of, and this is Sam Matthias.
Sam Matthias. Thank you so much, Sam.
Sam is a 39-year-old out of England living in Boston, Massachusetts. He says he's not a musician, but ever since he heard Smells Like Teen Spirit as a teenager, he was obsessed with sound. And I got to say, the first time I heard that, it blew my mind. Hadn't heard anything like that,
It was so fuzzy.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us may remember this huge change in American popular music that happened when it was when the video was launched on MTV, honestly. But it was, compared to what we'd been hearing before, it was so very, it was very unique. The guitar sounds were very, very fuzzy.
Mm-hmm. And so was his voice.
Well, it was
smooth during the verse, and then during the chorus, everything just goes.
Yeah, and it's funny to listen to it now. It doesn't sound very out of character for what else would later happen in the 90s.
Yeah.
You just have had to have been there, I suppose, to appreciate how kind of mind-blowingly different that was from what we'd been hearing up to that point. If you listen to, rock and roll, like popular rock and roll on MTV, around that time, you were used to hearing a lot of, kind of Los Angeles hair band type music, or you can go to heavier stuff like Metallica or whatever. But,
sure.
But Nirvana was different from all of that.
Totally. Well, his love for unfamiliar styles of music, instruments, and effects drove him towards a career in psychoacoustics. And what does Sam have to say about that, Matt?
So Sam says, in case you are unfamiliar with the term, psychoacoustics, this is a subfield of psychology that tries to connect the physics of sound to perception. I have absolutely heard of this. It fascinates me no end. My PhD was on pitch perception and involved running psychoacoustic experiments on undergraduates as well as friends and family members. Participants would sit inside a sound booth and listen to strange noises and tones, usually for several hours at a time.
Several hours at a time.
It was either an easy way to earn some cash or a mild form of torture, depending on who you asked. Nowadays, my research focuses on more clinical questions, like the genetics of age-related hearing loss and cognitive decline, but the science of music still fascinates me. Over the years, I have tried to learn guitar half-heartedly, and I have picked up a few music theory bits and pieces through my work, but I always suspected that my understanding and appreciation of music might be limited by not being a musician. I'm really into audiobooks, so a music theory podcast seemed like a good way to learn a bit more, and a recommendation on a random Reddit thread brought me to you. And I want to see this random Reddit thread.
Brings us a lot of people.
Yeah. This was in July last year, and I listened all the way up to Shankarian Analysis Part 1 by November, which is what an accomplishment. That's basically everything. That's all. And I now have a growing collection of synths to experiment with, the concepts I've learned. I've gotten so much out of your podcast that I felt duty-bound to become a patron subscriber. A couple of your episodes have touched on my areas of expertise, like overtones, absolute pitch, and so on. I think you do a great job with these. If you decide to do any more sciencey stuff, I would be happy to point you to some great resources.
Oh, yeah, speaking of the perfect pitch episode. See, I was also really insecure about those episodes because of my limited knowledge of physics and stuff like that. But that's kind of validating to hear.
Yeah, psychoacoustics really does facet. So, and Sam might be interested to hear this, but I dipped a toe into some psychoacoustic studies for my dissertation. Those of you who follow very, very closely, you might know. My dissertation was in the concept of polytonality, simultaneous music key centers, right? And so there were a lot of studies, not a lot actually, but there were some studies done on whether the human ear could really perceive this, right? So they would play a piece of music that was nominally polytonal and then ask them, okay, play any pitch that you feel to be the central pitch, right? And see how many of them would play one key versus the other key versus nothing, it was some fascinating stuff. So yeah, it's always, and I've come across it occasionally ever since, or multiple times anyway, over the years. It's really fascinating stuff. The kind of music perception sort of stuff.
Good fodder for another episode, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks again, Sam. Sam is a member of Patreon, our Patreon community.
Thank you so much, Sam. You really help us keep doing this.
Absolutely. Keeps the lights on over here. If you go to patreon.com/musicstudent101, you too can support us. You can support us, and you can see some of the cool little perks that you get for doing that based on whatever level of support you get.
Yes, one of which is we will answer your music question specifically.
That is one.
In no less than 15 minutes.
No less than 15 minutes.
They're all over 15 minutes, like every one of them.
Exactly. We just did one recently. It was about an hour. But we covered a lot of good stuff.
We covered some good stuff.
So go check that out if you want to see it. Okay, so in lieu of listener mail, because this is going to be kind of a bulky episode, and for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and skip the listener mail this time around and replace it with a good review of what the 12-bar blues is. Matt, if you want to take the lead on that, because we will be referencing that.
Okay.
Rub those hands together.
Here we go. So the 12-bar blues is a conflagration of a chord progression and a almost sort of poetic structure kind of thing.
Conflagration of chord progression is pretty darn poetic, if you ask me.
Yeah, right. Well, so the poetry, if you will, of the 12-bar blues is AAB, right? So a statement is made, that statement is repeated, and then that statement is completed in a interesting, relevant, insightful, or sort of way.
In a punchline kind of way.
Yeah. So, for example, Poor Boy Blues, right, which is one of the classic original 12-bar blues songs. I'm just a poor boy, I can't even spell my name, statement. I'm just a poor boy, people, I can't even spell my name, statement repeated. And then the B, the letters of the alphabet, to me, they all look the same, right? That's the first stanza of, so statement A, repeat A, B, finished in a clever way, I guess is the.
Yes, and within these statements, he might make the statement, I'm a poor boy, what was that?
I can't even write my name.
Then afterwards, that would be the call, and then maybe a response would happen on the guitar as a lick. You know?
Yeah.
So there's a call and response based on the
So there's and so
work songs.
Yeah, absolutely. Underlining this is a chord progression, and the chord progression is centered around the 1. I'm just in C because I'm lazy today. The 1, and then the 4, and then the 5, right? Mm-hmm. Which are all chords we know. Mm-hmm. But the first thing we're going to do is we'll make sevenths out of them. So, right? So we're going to go. So that A section is all going to be 4 measures long, or 4 bars long. And it's going to be 4 measures of 1. I'm just a poor boy. People, I can't even write my name. Right? And then the second A is going to be 4 measures, but those first 2 measures are going to be in the 4 chord. People, I said, it's a poor boy. Said I can't even write my name. And the second 2 are back to the 1, right?
Yeah.
And then that B section is kind of the really fun one, where it goes 2 measures in 5. To me, the alphabet. And then to 4. To me, they all look the same. Right? Like that. So 4 measures of 1, makes 4 bars. 2 measures of 4 and 2 measures of 1 makes 4 bars. A measure of 5, a measure of 4, and then 2 measures of 1 actually make 4 bars. 4 times 3 is 12. 12-bar blues.
12-bar blues.
Yeah. Chord progression designed to support the AAB lyrical structure of the lyrics, And every stanza will repeat that chord progression.
Yes, and there's exceptions to every song, of course, and every style, of course.
Sure, yeah.
But if we had to really kind of sum up blues across the board in general, these 3 chords dominate a good bit of the blues.
This is kind of the tree from which the branches grew, right? So we branched out from 12-bar blues in a lot of different directions in a lot of different places, right? But yeah, this basic 12-bar blues idea is kind of the root of all of that branching out. Yeah. Really, the blues has a root of its own. There's a root to the root. that goes back to the spirituals that were sung by the slaves in revivals, like before the Civil War, and even that goes back to some say can be traced back to African music traditions before they were slaves. So
some of those melodies and work songs. Well, it was more work songs when they showed up in the States, obviously.
Absolutely, but you mentioned call and response, like something that would happen. So in the last 2 measures of the first line, right? The first A line, there would often be like a little guitar lick doing a kind of call and response thing. Call and response is a very integral feature of a lot of traditional African musics. Yeah. So, some music experts will happily trace that line and say, well, call and response is this very African thing, and here it is showing up in this African American music, in the 17th and 18th centuries. Other people will say, don't be so fast, because we can't really prove those kind of connections.
It's true.
But there you are.
Yeah. Well, cool. So there's the 12-bar blues, huh?
And that's the 12-bar blues.
Okay, now, so I was trying to figure out ways to put this all together because there's that. I started to kind of look into the idea of a timeline for the blues, and there's not really.
That's really hard
because the Piedmont blues covers timelines pre-war and post-war, and a lot of these do, except for the old.
Yeah, I was about, and so did Delta blues, and yeah,
exactly. So we're going to focus on 2 things today. Like I said, Piedmont blues and Texas blues, and we'll start with Piedmont blues.
Okay.
Piedmont blues, a.k.a. the East Coast blues or the Southeastern blues, right? The Piedmont blues performers enjoyed their peak popularity between the mid-1920s and mid-1940s.
Okay.
The main style centered around the guitar finger-picking style that kind of bared a resemblance to ragtime. You want to tell us a little bit about ragtime, Matt, real quick?
Well, ragtime is, and don't ask me to play it, but you've got a very consistent... You got a very consistent left hand over here that is allowing the right hand can kind of go off and, kind of stuff, and do all kinds of actually very dissonant and very improvisational things.
It was also kind of considered the first official American form of music, right?
Yeah.
Or genre.
Yeah. It was played in saloons and bars and things, really at the formation of the country.
Yeah. So on the guitar, how this translated is on the right hand, the thumb would cover a solid bass line while other fingers would play syncopated melodies.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing, but, guitarist.
Yeah, there's a guitarist. Yeah.
The term Piedmont blues was conceived by researcher Peter B. Lowry and folklorist Bruce Baston. The Piedmont Plateau region spans across the East Coast from Richmond, Virginia to Atlanta, Georgia, basically. According to Nick Spitzer, professor of anthology and folklorist in this region, black and white economic and cultural patterns have overlapped considerably, more so than in the nearby areas or in the Deep South. Piedmont blues styles reflects this, meshing traces of gospel, fiddle tunes, blues, country, and ragtime into its rolling and exuberant sound.
Wow.
Says this folklorist. But, musicians who adopted the Piedmont style hailed from as far as north as Maryland, Delaware and New York later on, Pennsylvania, and then to the southern states of Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. The Piedmont style, story time, Matt. I was driving back from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I was working on one of those jobs where you're talking to the football coach. They got a game called football out there, and I love it. Real good out here in the South. That's my Arlo Guthrie impersonation.
Very nice.
On the way back, I heard Spotify brought up Alice's Restaurant.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that song?
Yes, I have.
Well,
Have you ever eaten at the restaurant?
He doesn't even start. The whole thing is just kind of rambles a bit. He's just going around the story and doesn't even bring up Alice's Restaurant until way later on. He starts off talking about it, then like 3-4 minutes in the song. Oh yeah, I was talking about this. But his style he's playing is kind of Piedmont style, guitar picking kind of. Let's see here. I don't know if I can do this because again, I'm not a blues guy, but it's kind of like with a 7th chord, of course, in the morning.
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing,
It almost kind of reminds me of like R.L. Burnside and his family, those kind of people. They weren't Piedmont, but there's that. So would you say like one of his characteristics is sort of the thumb and forefingers picking two different melodies, like the thumb picking a bass and the forefingers picking a.
Yeah, kind of like you were doing on the piano over there.
Yeah.
The left hand would be doing boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
boom,
yeah.
While still playing those chords in between on the alternate beats, like on the upbeats.
Oh, cool.
While the right hand takes a melody, which is pretty impressive stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about what I want to do is talk about kind of 3 of the main musicians who kind of were the main superstars in this style, or some of the more recognized names in this style.
Sure.
And then maybe we'll play an example of the style.
That sounds great.
Carefully and quickly. Of course, some of this stuff is so old, I'm not really too concerned about,
Right.
legal stuff. Anyways, we'll start off with Gary Davis, a.k.a. Blind Gary Davis, a.k.a. Reverend Gary Davis. Was born in Lawrence, South Carolina in 1869. Psh, almost did it again. 1896. According to his account, he went blind in his early infancy, and he was among 2 children who survived to adulthood, 2 children of 8.
Wow.
And his parents didn't treat him very well, and eventually they moved him into the care of his paternal grandmother. At age 10, his father was killed in Birmingham, Alabama, and he was told it was by a Birmingham sheriff, which isn't too difficult to believe back then.
Right.
As a kid, he sang in choir and then took an interest in the guitar. He developed his own style of fingerpicking, using the thumb and index finger to play gospel, blues, and ragtime, but also doing traditional pieces in 4-part harmonies. So he's using the guitar in these 2 different ways, but the former sounds more like the ragtime thing that we were talking about.
Right.
In the mid-1920s, Durham, North Carolina was a well-known center for black culture, and that's where he moved. And this is where he got immersed in the Piedmont sound and began collaborating with its musicians, among them Bull City Red and Blind Boy Fuller, who turned out to be a student of his. And that's a name many have probably heard of. These 3 were introduced to American Record Company and via local store owner and music enthusiast J.B. Long in 1935, which is what kicked off his career. So, by then he was steeped in the gospel music scene, having been converted to Christianity. And 2 of his big hits were Samson and Delilah and the Death Don't Have No Mercy. And then now the former was recorded by Peter, Paul, and Mary in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know? And the royalties allowed him to buy a house and live fairly comfortably until he passed away in 1972.
Okay.
But his influences made it well into the kind of folk rock scene via artists like Grateful Dead and Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And you'll hear probably, when I think about Piedmont style, I think about some Grateful Dead songs for sure that had that ragtime kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Of course, they also...
That's an interesting connection.
Yeah, isn't it? So now, that's one blind gentleman. There's a lot of blind people in these blues in these blues things, it turns out. And I'm not sure what that's all about.
No, yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
I mean, it's challenging enough being an African-American back then during that time period. You throw blindness on top of it.
Yeah.
Those struggles get even more real, you know?
Yeah.
But anyways, that brings us to blind Willie McTell. William Samuel McTell was born blind in one eye in 1898 in Thompson, Georgia. And by late childhood, he lost vision in the other.
Wow.
He excelled in the music programs at school in accordion and a harmonica, and he learned to play guitar from his mother. When his mother passed away in the 1920s, he took to the road and became a songwriter or itinerant musician. Did I say that right?
I think so.
I guess it's like a freelance kind of moonlighting kind of thing. Mm-hmm. He played popular tunes, ragtime, gospel, and reels throughout Atlanta and Augusta, Georgia. And his first record deal was with Victor in 1927. And some of these recordings included Statesboro Blues and Three Women Blues. He didn't sell a lot of records because this was the beginning of the Great Depression. And obviously that put a damper on a lot of record sales.
I bet.
And creativity at that time. His style was fluid and syncopated in the rag tradition. And he used a 12-string guitar for fingerpicking and slide styles, which is kind of cool.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I thought...
That sounds hard.
Yeah, no kidding.
It'd be tough on the fingers.
Tough on the fingers, for sure. And so he played many different kind of styles and genres, including blues, ragtime, religious music, and oddly, hokum. To play religious music and hokum and obviously not in the same room, but even in the same repertoire. Hokum is kind of like what we call body.
Yeah.
Right? And if you go back and listen to some early hokum records, it's stuff that would make Aquafina blush. It's like really dirty.
It can be pretty bad, yeah.
A lot of double entendres, and then some that just aren't even double
some
entendres.
Some that are just single, just entendres.
Yeah. But anyways, that's Blind Willie McTell. Each of these people kind of have their own style that they bring to it, but a lot of it is, again, based on this ragtime kind of jazz. And then finally, I want to talk about Elizabeth Cotten, a.k.a. Leba Cotten. She was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina in 1893. And the youngest of 5 kids, she was only known in the home as Little Sis. So that she named herself Elizabeth on her first day of school.
That's funny.
Wouldn't that be funny? We can't do that these days.
No.
You can't shoot. If I could have chosen my name, what would it... Ninja Werewolf Burns.
Ninja Werewolf Burns.
She was pretty modest about her name change. Optimus Prime Burns.
Optimus.
So anyways, by age 8, she was learning music. In her early childhood, she would sneak into her brother's room in his absence and tinker with his guitar and banjo. Banjo we brought up in the first episode because it came straight from Africa, basically.
Yeah.
And we talked about the Dockery kind of plantation where a lot of these guys met up, and they're also Mexican people with guitars, Spanish people with guitars.
Yeah.
And some wonder if that's how the guitars got into the scene,
Yeah.
So at age 9, she had to leave school and join the domestic workforce. And then by age 12, she was finally able to afford her own guitar and began to teach herself and develop her own style, known as the Cotten style, which was picking out bass lines with her fingers, mind you.
Oh, wow.
To accompany the melodies she was playing with her thumb. And you heard that right. Because why would you do that?
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to envision... Is the guitar upside down? Is she left-handed?
Speaking of Kurt Cobain.
Okay, yeah.
She was left-handed. So instead, rather than restring the guitar, she just decided to
You just flipped it over?
Well, she couldn't if her brother's out of the room, she can't just restring it and play it and then restring it. She's just got to deal with the time she has.
Got to flip it over, yeah.
The precious time she has. Yeah, so anyways, in her early teens, she wrote Freight Train, which would later become very much popularized.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and it very much embodies the style we're talking about. Meanwhile, at age 15, she married Frank Cotton and left her music behind for many years. And later on in life, she was working at a department store, and one day she helped a lost child find her mother. Well, this child was Peggy Seeger, and her parents, Ruth Crawford Seeger, was a composer and teacher.
Yeah.
You know the name?
I do. Wow.
And ethnomusicologist Mike Seeger, they invited her to work at their home.
Yeah.
And this is how she was rediscovered in 1958. At age of 62, she finally recorded her first album, Freight Train and Other North Carolina Folk Songs, with the aid of Mike Seeger.
Yeah, that tracks.
Another fine folklorist, ethnomusicologist, song catcher, as I call him. And this song also became well known during the folk revival of the 1960s.
Yeah.
Which, we'll talk about that later on too. That's another episode.
That's a whole other thing.
But Cotton was using chords a little beyond the 1, 4, and 5 and the 12 bar that the 12 bar blues was built on. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, it was.
We are going to listen to a song called Freight. Well, we just talked about Freight Chain, and that's what we're going to give a listen to.
Cool, yeah.
And do you want to listen to it first or talk about the chords?
Let's listen to it first.
Okay, so this is Freight Train by Elizabeth Cotton. I immediately recognized this part.
Yeah.
Hear that thing? That's not 145 at all.
That almost sounds like 6/7.
That's interesting.
Freight train, run so fast.
That's 1 to 5.
Freight train, run so fast.
That's already broken some rules of
Please don't
convention.
tell what train I'm on. They won't know what route I'm gone.
Yeah, so how about that? First of all, the A section is 1 and 5, which normally is 1 and 4 in the 12 bar blues. And then that little turnaround, what's going on there?
I don't know for sure, but there was definitely a 6.
Well, it's actually 1 to major 3 to 4.
There's 4. 1 to is that a major 3?
That one threw me off too. Yeah, so if you were in the key of A, for example,
that would be C sharp, E sharp, G sharp. That would be a. Okay.
Well, hold on a second. It would be C sharp major to D. It would be A major to C sharp major.
Yeah,
to D major. Yeah. Which we all know C in the key of A, C sharp would be a minor chord. The 3 chord would be a minor chord.
Right. So and just to have a 3 chord in the chord progression is all. This is a variation off of the 12 bar blues. Right? So what strikes me is that the lyrics are still sort of holding a little more closely to that AAB style. Not exactly, but there's a lot of repeated elements, and it's just and it almost sounds like the amount of time that the chorus take up, the sort of 2 measures per chord kind of thing, is still there. It's just the chords we've messed up, right? And instead of going 1-4, we're going 1-5, right?
And actually counting it in my head, I think it was an 8 bar blues. That might have been an 8 bar blues, come to think of it.
Yeah. Oh, I just got it. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist myself. I had to look up the chords.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so that's 1-5. I'm back to 1. And yeah, so if we're in C, then that is E7, E major minor 7.
Acting like it would be a 5 of, except it goes to a 4. It doesn't go to 6. It would be a 5 of 6, wouldn't it be? A 3?
Yeah, it would be a 5 of 6. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, that's not how this is functioning, right?
Nope.
I would call that that major 3
borrowed. Not even borrowed from minor, because then it would have been a C major.
I feel like its ultimate goal is probably F, right? So I feel like the 3 is moving to 4.
Oh, if we are in the key of
Yeah. So as
C.
that, it is kind of still a 1-4-5 progression, especially towards the end. We just have this E7 as a substitute for C. So we have 3 substituting for the tonic, which 3 is a recognized possible substitution of the tonic. You know, this is a chromatic mediant relation, right? A chromatic mediant transition.
Yeah.
So we still have kind of 1 prolonged by 3, moving to 4, right? And then the rest of that proceeds somewhat normally. There's another 1 thrown in before the 5. But so, you know, the whole idea here is we're taking that sort of 1-4-5 and we're kind of doing a little bit more elaborate, a little bit more inventive kind of stuff with it, right? It's not just that solid progression. You know, this is something that's a little more, a little bit more, what's the word? They got a little more depth and a little more reflection to it.
Totally.
So, yeah, great song.
Yeah. And it has that ragtime feel, even in the chords, like ragtime chords. There's a lot of 1, 6, 2, 5, and there's a lot of different chords other than just 1, 4, and 5 in ragtime style.
Yeah, ragtime, it has a lot of, I mean, you know, it's like jazz in that way. There's a lot of, you know, 3, 6, 2, 5s and, you know, moving around the circle of fifths in that way. And, yeah, and absolutely.
So there you have it for the Piedmont style. That was Elizabeth Cotton, Blind Willie McTell, and Reverend Gary Davis.
Yeah, it's a great song.
Other greats you might have heard of: Blind Blake, Josh White, Blind Boy Fuller, Brownie McGee, and Sonny Terry. And Matt, you know the way I'm going to find a way to fit Pink Floyd into any discussion that we can on any episode, right? Pink Floyd was actually named after 2 Piedmont artists, Pink Anderson in the South Carolina Greensboro area. And also, that's who was Pink, by the way. That's which one is Pink. And Floyd Council from Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Nice.
And I went around listening to some of their music while researching for this episode. And it sounded a lot like there's a song called Seamus that Pink Floyd does on the album Metal that I'm now learning was kind of done in the Piedmont style. Because a lot of this stuff, or a few of their songs sounded a lot like that. You could tell where they got that from.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, so now on to Texas blues, shall we?
Texas blues, let's have it.
While the Piedmont blues was kind of well established from the roots of those African Americans that occupied the Southeast from the day of their arrival, basically, this population didn't really make its way into Texas in any significant number until after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, about 200 years after said arrival date.
Right.
You know, so there were slaves already there, but in the early 1900s, the black population began to migrate out west to Texas to work in the lumber yards and cattle ranches and oil fields. And then while still maintaining the themes of hardship, oppression, and love life struggles, as well as the call and response delivery with the notes bent in blue. The music that came from this region has elements of jazz, but with a bit more of a hard-driving swing to it compared to the Piedmont blues.
Okay, and this was sort of chronologically after Piedmont blues, or
no? This kind of
simultaneous, synchronous. What's that word happening at the same time? Synchronous. Yeah, they happened at the same time.
Contemporary.
There you go.
Yeah, because a lot of this stuff, a lot of these people we're talking about, like the early Piedmont blues, the artists were born in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
The newer ones were born in the early 1900s. That kind of stuff, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But it really, I guess, when the emancipation occurred, that's when people started really moving out from
out west. Yeah.
So the Delta, moving out from the Delta and moving out from the South, Southeast. And there's a style called barrel house or juke joint blues style that kind of started in Vicksburg, but really made a big splash in Texas blues. And that's kind of like it featured energetic piano derived from a boogie woogie style.
Interesting.
And so the boogie woogie style is kind of like you might hear a bass line going doon 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 while the piano's going that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
You got it, Matt? You gonna try it?
I don't know. Nope.
That sounded kind of Dorian.
Yeah.
or minor.
I can play it on my bass.
Yes, you could, without even thinking about it. But as the Texas blues evolved, it began to show elements of blues rock and southern rock. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know a lot of great blues artists that came out of Texas. We'll talk about some of them.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, we can start with Blind Lemon Jefferson. Blind Lemon Jefferson was born in 1883 on a farm in Couchman, Texas. In his early adult years, he moved to Dallas and was a street musician who became a big local hit. And his style was very intense. His playing was considered spasmodic. That's the word they used back then.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe rugged, rural, I don't know, untamed, you know?
Not in a consistent tempo is what I learned.
That's possible too, or meter for that matter.
Or meter for that matter, yeah.
He would play like a recognized 12 bars blues fashion, but he would often drop or add a beat to add excitement or drama, as we say.
Or an extra word.
Or an extra word. His voice was clear, loud, and in the tenor register.
Yeah.
He also traveled a lot and went on many adventures with the Lead Belly himself, famous Lead Belly. Spoiler alert. Paramount found him and released Got the Blues and Long and Lonesome Blues in 1926.
Oh, wow.
So between this time, 1926 and 1929, which was the beginning of the Great Depression, has been said to be the most prolific era for the early blues recordings.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a big drop-off during the Great Depression, and then there was a record recording strike between 1942 and 1944, where 2 years where nothing was recorded in that world. So anyways, he died by freezing to death on the streets, but the circumstances were unknown.
Oh, wow.
He spent a good deal of time in Texas, of course.
Right.
Which is a pretty big state. Probably more Dallas,
Yeah.
Either way, he needed help getting around, and a willing and interested candidate was one Aaron Tebow Walker.
Ah, T-Bone.
Yeah, and we'll get into him, but first, let us talk about Lead Belly.
Okay, let's talk about Lead Belly.
Because I don't want to jump around on this timeline any more than I have to. T-Bone Walker did come after the fact, after Lead Belly and after this cat.
Yeah.
So you've heard of Lead Belly. Speaking of this, there's how funny we have all these themes with Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, right? When Nirvana did in early 1990s, they did
the MTV Unplugged.
MTV Unplugged, yeah. And they sang one of his songs, "My Girl."
My girl.
My girl.
Yeah, that's all we can do for copyright reasons.
Yeah, and for your ears, for your listeners' ears.
Yeah.
So Huddy William Ledbetter, a.k.a. Lead Belly, was born in 1889. A lot of these people in the late 1800s. On a plantation on Mooringsport on the Louisiana side of Caddo Lake, which separates the northern borders of Texas and Louisiana.
Right, yeah.
And he was the youngest of two, and when he was 5, his family moved to Bowie County, Texas. Now, his first instrument was an accordion given to him by his uncle. And then somewhere in there, he picked up guitar because by 1903, he was a well-known singer-guitarist.
Yeah.
He was performing a lot in Shreveport on Fannin Street, which was a row of pubs, brothels, and dance halls.
Mm.
And this is where he formed his sound kind of based on the musical talents in that part of town. In his 20s, having fathered 4 children, he ventured away from home to earn a living for his living, playing guitar and maybe working on the occasional labor gigs. And then he ran into some trouble along the way. Are you familiar with his past?
Not that much.
Between the years of 1915 and 1939, he served several prison sentences, including a 30-year sentence for murder.
Ooh.
Now, in 1925, he wrote a song asking for clemency, which was then granted by Governor Pat Neff. How about that?
Wow.
And however, it wasn't until 1933 when he was visited during another prison sentence after that in Angola prison.
Ooh, now Angola I've heard of.
You've heard of that? What do you know about that?
That was one of the harshest, cruelest, and roughest incarceration environments in all of the country for a very, very long time. You know, the conditions the prisoners suffered were particularly intense, even for prisons of the time and place. There was also a set of recordings that came out of Angola prison, the Angola recordings, which are basically field recordings of a lot of different blues songs and spiritual songs and other things that the prisoners sang, and was just sort of tunes that they sang with each other and traded back and forth and things. And and it's considered a staple in our understanding of the evolution of blues, the Angola recordings.
I'm glad you brought that up. And I don't know if this was the same session, but 1933, like I said, he was in prison at the Angola prison.
Yeah.
When entered John and Alan Lomax, father and son folklorist. John the father, Alan the son.
Yeah, those are the guys that were responsible for a lot of the Angola recordings. So we may be talking about the same thing.
Well, they were working on a project for the Library of Congress, and they were recording him on a portable aluminum disc, and they loved it so much they came back a year later with better equipment and recorded hundreds more of his songs.
Yeah,
which I probably assume included other artists into.
Yeah,
that's really a fascinating project from the in its own.
Oh yeah, it fascinated me. I don't remember a lot about. I did some research on this once, and I don't remember a lot about it now. But yeah, because I don't think they were supposed to be recording for the Library of Congress. I don't think they were necessarily told to go to places like Angola, but they got down there and they said, well, here's where all the best music was. So they managed to weasel their way in, and there was a lot, some of the things they recorded were original music that those people had written. Other things were very old tunes that they'd heard other places, folk tunes that they'd, some of them are things that seemed to only exist in that prison. It was really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm sure they know the blues.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Like I said, Angola was notorious.
Yeah.
The guards were all white and extraordinarily racist. The living conditions were cramped and inhumane. They were often sent out to work, do various labor jobs and things in the surrounding area.
Chain gangs.
Yeah, right. And so it was a bad place to be.
Well, during this recording session came several songs, and many we've all heard of. And just from Lead Belly alone, "In the Pines," which we just talked about.
In the Pines, yeah.
Otherwise known as "My Girl" on the Nirvana album.
Yeah.
"Midnight Special." You know that one? "Let the Midnight Special."
Yes, yeah.
"Good Night, Irene."
Oh, yeah.
And "Pick a Bale of Cotton" and "Boll Weevil."
Pick a Bale of Cotton, yeah. Yeah.
So the Lomaxes took one of these records over to the governor, Oscar Allen, along with a petition for release. And lo and behold,
he gets out of jail again.
Now, while the prison claims he got out on good behavior, Dr. Jeremy claims maybe it was the power of music.
Hey, well, I got him out once.
Yeah. That's songwriting right there, man.
Yeah, no kidding. And just you talk about a cultural treasure. Him and all the, there are other songs from Angola, "Dig My Grave" and other things, and a lot of these have worked their way into sort of popular culture now. Zeitgeist. There's this is kind of my own research at this point. So, but there's an episode of Andy Griffith where Andy Griffith plays what was originally an Angola prison song, "Dig My Grave."
No kidding.
"Dig My Grave with a silver spade." Yeah.
Was it minor and slow and sad?
Yeah, Z minor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Rich heritage we're talking about here. And as we've seen, this music has found its way into the popular music that we all listen to. Rock and roll would not exist without the blues.
Yeah.
We have said this before.
That's true.
And we'll say it again. Bands like Pink Floyd and Nirvana and a whole lot of other ones had
Clapton, Page.
Oh, absolutely, Page. These people had a real awareness of this music. You know, it wasn't just, you know, some history lesson to them. You know, they were really, really passionate about it in their own lives, and you know, took some of their traditions into the music that we've all grown up listening to.
Absolutely.
Or at least all us old folks.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's funny we say that because I guess our Led Zeppelin is today's Nirvana. Today's kids' Nirvana. That was us in high school. We were listening to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin all day long.
Yeah. It just makes me feel, absolutely.
But you know, the first time I heard "Goodnight Irene," it was not as a blues song. It was a bluegrass.
It was like,
You'd seen a bluegrass band playing it as a waltz. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the first time I ever heard "Pick a Bale of Cotton" was some vocalist doing that in the recital, and without getting into it, let's just say it was not entirely authentic or respectful. But yeah, it just goes to show how these things have permeated all of our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got one more to cover here for the Texas blues scene.
T-Bone
of most importance. Aaron Tebow Walker. That's spelled Thibeaux.
Yeah, Tebow.
I guess that's got to be because the name is based on.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was born in 1918 in Linden, Texas, and of two musicians, mind you, Movalia Jimerson and Rance Walker. After that marriage split up, Marco Washington became his stepfather. Marco had taught a young T-Bone to play ukulele, banjo, guitar, violin, mandolin, and piano. So his new set of parents were all also friends with Blind Lemon Jefferson, and he would often join them for dinner. So at the age 10, Tebow left school, and then by 15, he was a professional performer in the Dallas blues scene. And he became Blind Lemon's student and, as previously mentioned, his guide through Deep Ellum, Dallas. You ever heard the Deep Ellum blues? Are you familiar with that one?
I don't think so.
Oh, sweet mama, daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard that.
I think one of Jerry Garcia's many get-ups did that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's also like a lot of...
missed that one.
There's a lot of Texas-style swing kind of in some of the Grateful Dead stuff, too.
Yeah.
Anyways, in 1929, he got his first recording deal with Columbia Records and released Trinity River Blues and Wichita Falls. Under the name Oak Cliff T-Bone. Oak Cliff was the community he was living in at the time.
Yeah.
Now, by 1935, at the age of 25, he was married with 3 kids and playing clubs in Los Angeles. In 1940, he was introduced to the electric guitar.
Oh, wow. That's late.
Now, some of these, 1940, yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Some of these pioneers of the electric guitar really changed the sound of blues. We kind of talked a little bit about how before the amplification, there would not have been a lot of guitar riffs and melodies because they would have been swallowed up by everything else going on.
Right, yeah.
You know? Same thing with vocalists.
Yeah.
With to start playing bigger halls, you needed more amplification, and finally they figured out how to do it, and that changed things. And then a couple of years later, he was traveling to Chicago to play at the Rum Boogie Cafe, and so that kind of introduced him to that scene. Still a Texas musician, but making his way to Chicago.
Yeah.
And between 1946 and 1948 is when he did a majority of his recordings with Black and White Records. Some of these include Call It Stormy Monday, but Tuesday's just as bad, which is a good one, Bobby Sox Blues, and Goodbye Blues. And then he also recorded with Imperial Records in the early 1950s and Atlantic Records in the late 1950s. And then by the 1960s, he kind of slowed down performing and recording. And then in 1975, he died of bronchial pneumonia. To me, T-Bone's music is kind of closer to what we think of blues today.
Yeah.
You'll hear the kind of kunk, 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 kunk.
Yeah,
kunk,
the 6/8 with the,
Yeah, the 4 count with the 6/8 kind of accent kind of thing. And as we go on with these blues episodes, it's going to get more into what we think today of blues. Like, 'cause when you're hearing some of these country blues, and I would have, if the first time I heard Piedmont blues, I would have just been like, oh, that's just ragtime on the guitar. You know?
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah, you can make that. Yeah, I mean, the further along you go, the less it feels like a history lesson, I guess, and the more it starts resembling, things that you've heard before, or things you grow up with. That's kind of true with anything.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to give another thing a listen real quick that'll kind of give you an idea of, well, at least the pioneer of the blues style, which is Blind Lemon Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to bring this one up because they talked about his spasmodic style of playing, and I was kind of fishing around trying to find something that kind of had that feel to it.
Right, yeah. And we landed on this.
We landed on, and have you listened to this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I found Easy Rider Blues, and I tell you what, this is a 12-bar blues.
Technically speaking.
But there's a measure of 4, then a measure of 5.
Yeah, I think there might be like 13 bars, actually.
Yeah, if you really add them all up together, those extra beats.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. This is Easy Rider Blues by Blind Lemon Jefferson.
Tell me where my easy rider goes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Tell me where my easy rider goes. My white women always in the
1,
road.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
The easy rider
See?
died on the road.
So, did you hear some of those extra beats?
Oh, yeah.
And on the turnaround, he put a measure of 6 where he would have normally put that measure of 5.
Yeah.
So
Oof.
if you're sitting there counting that stuff, now if you don't know to count for it, I probably not. If I was just listening in my car.
Yeah, it's very natural and flowing the way he's going through it. He's not really accenting anything new or anything like that. I think he's really just sort of stretching the meter a little bit to accompany the vocals he wants to sing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which again, that AAB format still quite prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Right, statement repeated, statement finished off in a clever way.
Mm-hmm. If you add up all the measures, it's still 12 measures. He's changing the meter.
Yeah,
regularly.
Just sort of to fit what he's singing and the way he wants to sing it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's probably not counting the meter. He's very clearly not counting the meter. He's probably just playing and then letting his singing guide how long to hold a chord or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So there you have 3 greats from the Texas region. Now, other greats you may have heard of from this region include Bessie Tucker,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Copeland, Albert Collins, and Freddie King, who we talked about most recently.
Right, yeah.
And his piano style was very much kind of like that boogie-woogie style.
Yeah.
If memory serves. And then later on, Lightning Hopkins, Johnny and Edgar Winter, and Jimmy Vaughn and Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
Do you know who Jimmy Vaughn is?
Refresh my memory.
I didn't know this until I just read this. Do you know there's a band called the Fabulous Thunderbirds?
Yeah.
And they had the song, that was a big song, Wrap It Up,
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
That was Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I couldn't remember if it was his father or his brother.
I remember,
That's what gave me pause. But yeah okay.
I remember the video on MTV and be like, who are these cats? The guy had a mustache, and I was like, who has a mustache? It was really, I always liked that song.
Yeah.
Something about those Texas brothers, huh?
Yeah, well, guitar players well know their name of Stevie Ray. It's
Exactly, yeah. And we'll get into him. We'll talk about him a little bit more maybe when we talk about the modern blues. He was born
modern blues.
Born of the Texas blues for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, modern blues is its own thing with a huge conflagration of styles coming together. And
yeah, some historians, in fact, a lot of them separate blues into pre-war and post-war. And I think when they're saying war, they mean either World War I and II or just World War II mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this would certainly count as post,
Yeah.
Or what we're getting into at this point.
What we're getting into now post-war. Because we're up to the 40s, essentially. So,
Exactly. So, in lieu of a recap.
Because that was a lot.
I'll just give some of my sources.
Okay.
Obviously, encyclopediabritannica.com, and then Wikipedia. And now what I do is I'll find Wikipedia and I'll kind of read the overall, and then I'll find the parts that really interest me, and then I'll cross-reference them with other sources.
Yeah.
Such as Smithsonian and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then another article I found was The History of Texas Blues on Texas Matters via Texas Public Radio by David Martin Davis. And all these links will be on the website, which I'm told we don't mention enough.
Yes, the links are on the website.
MusicStudent101.com.
Go check out the website. There's all sorts of cool stuff on the website.
There is, actually. And you can also find out how to donate to us.
Indeed.
There's a PayPal, there's Patreon. Mm-hmm. Anyway, enough about us. Because we suck at asking for money.
We do. We really do.
When we do, we're kind of proud of ourselves. There was another article called The History of... Actually, this wasn't an article. This is a video I saw that was really good called The History of Barrel House Blues Piano, an Educational Performance at the Jalopy Theater by Ethan Linewand. And it's really cool. He actually goes through the history and then kind of tells about the elements and then plays a few songs for you.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'd recommend that to anyone who wants to know not just about Barrel House Blues, but a little bit about its history, because he covers ragtime and plays the Maple Leaf Rag, and he plays a lot of good examples.
Maple Leaf Rag, yeah. Scott Joplin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the most famous of all time.
Yeah, I can't believe that didn't come up when we were mentioning ragtime earlier.
I think it did, actually, in our first episode.
Oh, well,
of the Blues,
yeah. Okay.
But this is the one that goes, bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-bum, bum.
Yeah.
Kind of,
Yeah.
Anyway. And then finally, I found an article called Elizabeth Cotton, Master of American Folk Music, on Smithsonian Folkways Recordings. And I guess that was a staff article.
Okay.
So, we covered a lot today.
We did.
I hope we covered it well enough. Honestly, you could really probably do a whole podcast on the blues. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like not a podcast episode, a whole podcast.
It's a show.
Yeah, it's a show.
So we're trying to give as much as we can within the time we have. And hopefully get you guys interested in checking out some of these other artists.
Indeed.
And some of these articles.
Yeah. And next we'll be getting into Chicago blues and New Orleans.
Yeah.
And then down the line, boogie woogie, jump blues, modern blues, whatever else we come up with.
Yeah, whatever else we haven't done by then, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot more to say about it, and a lot of styles still to cover. Some within regions. I mean, I think we've covered most of the regions, and then we'll get into Chicago and New Orleans, and then we'll be more talking about, I guess, playing styles like boogie woogie and jump blues, like you say.
Well, yeah. And moving away from 12-bar blues, definitely post-war. All right.
Yeah. Oh, and then don't forget the folk, the 1960s, Eric Clapton, the Beatles, Pink Floyd. We talked about all that,
Yeah.
So many artists inspired by these pioneers.
There would be no rock and roll without the blues.
Absolutely not. So, we'll see you guys next time.
Take care.
If you've enjoyed this discussion on the blues, keep on listening because there's plenty more to come. If you want to support us, click the donate page on our website, musicstudent101.com. Or like, subscribe, and share with a friend. You can find our merchandise on redbubble.com/musicstudent101. And for questions or comments, write to us at info@musicstudent101.com.